Good day, everyone. My name is Mohsen Kalantari from Melbourne University. I will be chairing and moderating this session. So we've got a number of presentations, as you see in the program. Given that we are late, we start the presentations. The first presentation, which I am sharing the screen now so you can all see, is first presenter is Rafael Tuts. He's a director at the UN Habitat, and he will be talking about urbanization challenges in the urban-rural continuum. Rafael, over to you. I can click the slides as you progress in your presentation.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Very good, and thanks also for moving the presentation on my behalf. And I'm very happy to be here today at the FIG 2020 Commission 7th annual meeting, representing also our Global Land Tool Network, which has been a very active partner, obviously. But today I would like to focus on an area that has attracted a lot of interest recently in our UN Habitat Assembly, and also in as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the urban-rural linkages. And of course, it's very relevant for the discussion on land, but I just want to take a step back. If you take the next slide now, to explain why this is so important for UN Habitat and for the United Nations. The member states have seen over the past years that there was a very strong emphasis in the development discourse, a move from rural emphasis to urban emphasis. And I think as a way of correcting this, there has been a lot of arguments saying that the rural and urban spaces are very closely linked, both economically, socially, and environmentally. And that this is at the center of sustainable development, that you cannot look at urban and rural areas separately, but you need to bring this together and basically move away from the outdated dichotomy of urban and rural as separate spheres. Next slide. This has been solidified in the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted in 2015 in the Rio+20 outcome documents, and particularly in the goal number 11, but also in other goals. In SDG 11, there is a very strong emphasis on the importance of regional planning as a way to promote sustainable cities. So that implicitly emphasizes the connection between urban and rural areas. And there is a specific target, process target 11.A, that focuses on these linkages. Next. And this is also emphasized in the new urban agenda, which came in 2016, which is a blueprint for more sustainable and more fair urban development. Again, the connections between the urban and rural domains were very clearly emphasized. So then in 2019, our first ever UN Habitat Assembly, as you know, the UN Habitat went through an institutional reform, moved from a governing council into UN Habitat Assembly. And in the very first assembly, the member states then adopted very few resolutions, very few substantive resolutions, but one of them was explicitly focusing on urban-rural linkages. So that was in 2017, they adopted this. And then over the past years, we moved forward in this resolution. And you can see on the screen the type of work that has happened led by UN Habitat and different organizations, bringing together different stakeholders, more than 40 organizations in this to implement this resolution of the UN Habitat Assembly on strengthening urban-rural linkages. And as you see, this is something that appeals in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. So it's a global approach, and then different thematic areas can feed into that. Next. You can see here how this is organized thematically. There are different topics of connection that are being explored through a set of guiding principles. The entry points are very diverse. Of course, food is one of them, very clearly, urban-rural linkages through the lens of food, but employment is another one. Migration of people is another very clear entry point. And there are many entry points that are being developed further and that need special guidance to make this linkage between urban and rural spheres strengthened. Next. Then, drilling further on this, we have provided a wide range of tools that are focusing on either on a geographic area or on a thematic area under this topic. For instance, you can see there urban-rural linkages for nutrition specifically. Also more specific capacity development guidance is provided. And so this is our way to implement this resolution, both from a knowledge point of view, but also from an operational point of view. Next slide. You see here some of the areas where this is taking place in Bolivia, for instance, in Nigeria, in the state of Zanzibar, in Tanzania, etc. So this is where we have now currently 10 countries that are where Habitat is supporting specific on-the-ground programs to strengthen urban-rural linkages for sustainable development. Next. Now, this topic is again very important, or has become perhaps even more important since the beginning of this year with the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And when we look at the urban-rural linkages through the lens of the pandemic, the whole approach towards urban-rural linkages has been strengthened because of the particular issues that we have seen in periods of lockdown, constraining some of the movements between urban and rural areas. So the concept and the principles have been reviewed, and we have organized a series of webinars and sessions, 5 sessions on this topic through the period of the pandemic, with very specific focus on how to manage, how to keep these urban-rural linkages alive in situations of a pandemic through appropriate policy, legislation, and governance systems. Next. Now, very importantly, and I'm now focusing on land, but land is just one of the key dimensions of our work that links to urban-rural linkages. There are others, such as public space, for instance, such as climate change, such as mobility, which are also very, very important. But considering the topic of today's meeting, I'd like to focus a little bit more on land, which is the underlying foundation, obviously, of urban-rural linkage. And within that spectrum, we are looking at different elements that are entry points in this discussion. Better planning, better land use planning, ensuring agriculture across the different domains, and tenure security related to urban-rural linkages. These are elements that are brought up by using land as an entry point. So we are looking at land in conjunction with other areas, land and mobility, land and public space, land and climate change, which are equally important in urban and rural areas, and land is the connecting factor in this regard. Next. So what the Global Land Tool Network does in this is supporting specific land interventions, both in urban and rural contexts. So this is one of our programs that cuts across this, the urban-rural spheres, and focusing specifically on fit-for-purpose land administration in both rural and urban areas, focusing also on the continuum of land rights, on different tenure systems, different ways of land rights security across the urban and rural spheres. Again, one of the ways of working of the network is it's a global network, but it also develops very strong networks at the local level, at the country level, looking at both urban and rural actors in the field of land that can contribute to better land administration for both urban and rural population, particularly focusing on the poor segments of the society. Next. So to conclude, we believe that integration of urban and rural development should now be the norm, should not be an exception, should be very clearly integrated in the full development discourse. It is an area that is not well funded as opposed to other areas of our work. So that's why you have seen a fairly limited number of countries that we can where we have actually work on the ground. So at this stage is still very much a normative-driven, guidelines-driven activity, but there is much more needed. There are many more countries that have requested support in this regard to align their sustainable development policies to focus particularly on urban-rural linkages. Within that, we continue to have a very strong focus on the less privileged groups, also focus on women and the poorer segments of the society. And within all this, partnerships between academia, local government, and community groups is critical. Connecting obviously this all to the land administration in the countries with their diverse rural and urban articulations. So I'll leave it here as an introduction of this topic and remain available for any comments you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Raf, for your presentation. I'll check the chat box and if there are questions for Raf. Is there any question?
Mohsen, Daniel here.
Yes. Hey, Daniel. Did you want to?
Raf, thank you for your presentation. In this, are you more worried about urban development or rural development in this need for linkage?
No, I think that's put the question like that. We are not worried about any of the two more than the others. We are, of course, seeing that the world is urbanizing very rapidly, that the sphere in between urban and rural areas, the peri-urban sphere, is getting more and more blurred with less clear articulation of functions. So we are not so much, it's not an area, it's not that we are more worried for one or the other, but of course there is a diminishing of the population very clearly percentage-wise in rural areas. But through strengthening the linkages, we would be able to focus on urban development while not leaving any interests of the rural population behind. So it's that concept that brings the two spheres together up by strengthening the linkages rather than focusing as we did in the past, over the past 20, 30 years, where there was a focus either on urban spheres or rural spheres. It's an integrated approach that is much more sustainable and that brings both spheres, that strengthens both spheres together. Over.
Thank you, Raf.
Thank
Is
you.
there any questions? So you can write your questions in the chat box if you have, or if you have a long question, I'm happy to allow you to talk as well. There's a limitations with webinars, so I need to allow individuals to talk. So if you've got a question like that, happy to give you the opportunity.
Maybe I should mention that if you look at the presentation, there is a slide with the tools, and I think that's the one where there is a hyperlink specifically to all these resources which are available online, to the training materials, the specific guidelines on thematic areas like the food, the migration, etc. is all available on our web site and through this link, which is part of the presentation that I've shown.
Thank you, Raf. I do not see any questions in the chat box, so we can move to the next presentation, which is will be presented by Dr. Kim Taikjin and Dr. Simon Jeon from Korea and from Korean Land Administration System. So we can hear you, Dr. Taikjin, and if you want to share your screen and start your presentation, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Kindly introduced for me in Chairman Daniel, and especially thank you. Nice to meet you too again in Rohan. And my FIG Commission 7, my colleague. Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, my colleague. I'm Taikjin Kim, the exclusive officer of special data infrastructure in charge of special information business here in LX. We call it LX. Old name is KCSC Korea Cadastre Survey Corporation, but we changed the name in LX. It is a great pleasure to attend this FIG Commission 7 teleconference. And I'd like to thank FIG for giving us the opportunity to present in this session. Through this session, we would like to share our cases on digital twin, which is one of the latest emerging smart city technology today. Next. Let me quickly introduce the organization very briefly. LX is a public organization under the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport of Korea. It was established since 1977 to carry out cadastral surveying for the entire country. Currently, we are carrying out not only cadastral surveying, but also working on developing and improving spatial data infrastructure, such as establishing land information system and digital twin model, etc. We are living in an era of city. Today, many cities in the world are vulnerable to problems that arise due to rapid urbanization and population concentration. Problems such as fine dust traffic congestion, spread diseases, including COVID-19, are hampering the sustainable development of the city. As a solution to all these problems, smart city is continuously being introduced, and the need for a virtual urban space or digital twin that can integrate this distributed urban data into one came to the fore. In line with this trend, LX is focusing on using digital twin techniques to recreate cities in virtual space, identified problems that cities have, and released LX digital twin model that can address them by providing solutions. To be more specific, in 2018, LX signed an MOU with Jeonju City to cooperate in the field of smart city digital twin. In 2019, we successfully conducted a pilot project for establishing digital twin model and developing model-based services in Jeonju. Let me give you a quick overview of the LX digital twin pilot project. The project was carried out through two sub-components named Virtual Jeonju and Cyber Jeonju project. Virtual Jeonju referred to establishing a city in a digital space with three-dimension spatial data. Cyber Jeonju refers to integrating various administrative data that are produced by the city, and based on this, development spatial analysis model that can be linked with the digital twin model to be provided as a service. This project was completed in 2019, and currently we have expanded the target area to be the entire area of Jeonju City. Okay, now I will hand over to Simon to share the details of the project. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kim. Let me just take off the mask. All right. As Dr. Kim mentioned, I once again thank you for this opportunity to present here today. And I'll be continue from Dr. Kim where he left off, take over and explain and present on the details of the LX Digital Twin project, the recent project that we had. So before we do that, I would like to just quickly touch on the definition of smart city. Everybody probably is aware of smart city very well, and you're probably sure that it is very difficult to put a smart city in one phrase of sentence. But if you look into all these different smart city definitions, that you'll be able to find a common purpose, and that is to apply new technologies such as ICT, big data, and apply all these technologies into cities to improve quality of life for the citizens, and as well as to also to solve various city problems. So we have a lot of problems in the city and accidents, such as what you see on the screen. And therefore, we need strategies and technologies as well to effectively diagnose, predict, and also to respond to these problems. Okay. And most of these city problems that I mentioned in the previous slide occur in space. A digital urban space infrastructure and multi-dimensional spatial data analysis are required to solve these problems. You will probably caught that the term that I used here, the digital urban space, is what I mean by digital twin. And let's quickly have a look at the concept of digital twin. So digital twin is a concept of creating a virtual world that is identical to the real world and use it to forecast and provide solutions on various kinds of problems that exists in reality. So through simulations and experiments. So if you apply this concept into a city, it will be to create a 3D model of city in a digital space, which is identical to the real city, and allow real-time data from, for example, IoT and CCTV and various administrative data, as well as geospatial data to be integrated and managed into this digital twin model. This way, we'll be able to simulate various kinds of city situations inside the digital twin model. And all those problems that we saw in the previous slide can be resolved by providing services through digital twin model. So in order to provide smart city services using digital twin, it was important to establish first a digital twin model as shown in this slide, where the model collects various spatial data from the real world, acquire various real-time data that gets produced in the city environment through IoT sensing, for example, as well as through CCTV, etc., and create a 3D virtual world through collected spatial data, where all acquired data sets are then integrated and managed in this so-called digital twin model, and that are ready to be converged and applied in various fields as to provide as smart city services. Such model allows us to make decisions efficiently, since you can avoid going through trials and errors by simulating all kinds of situations in advance inside the digital twin model, or basically inside the virtual world. So to realize this model to come true, as a start, us LX, we implemented a pilot project like Dr. Kim explained earlier to establish the digital twin model, where the target area for this project was a small area in Jeonju City and was a size of approximately 16 square kilometers. Okay. So this is the project which Dr. Kim showed us earlier. Just to simplify once again, the virtual Jeonju project was to establish 3D digital twin model basically. And the Cyber Jeonju project was to integrate various administrative data as well as other basic data that are produced and managed by the city. And so based on this, as Dr. Kim explained, we developed special data analysis models that can be linked with our digital twin model, which was created from the previous virtual Jeonju project. But these two projects happened simultaneously. Okay, now I'll share some of the process and outcomes of each of these subcomponent projects. Okay, through virtual Jeonju, which is you see on the screen, we established 3D models of various buildings, terrains, as well as facilities. So we adjusted the detail of the 3D model according to the type and attribute by complying with the CDGML, where CDGML, as you already know, it's an international standard for establishing 3D data. So we have established various models from LOD0 and up to LOD4, which you see on the bottom of the screen here, where the level of detail is the standard we used. So for buildings specifically, as you see on the screen, we established 3D models using from level 0 to all the way up to 4. So if I quickly, very simply explain how they differ, LOD0 is a model where height of terrain is displayed. You're looking in terms of buildings. LOD1 is a model with roofless buildings, and 2 is building with roof, basically. And the third one is the model that separates building floors exits and windows, etc. And lastly, LOD4, that's the spatial data model. That's the indoor spatial data model, basically. Okay. So in addition to buildings, which I just explained, we have also established 3D models for various facilities such as bridge, as you see on the screen. And a library model for different types of bridge was established to allow for an efficient update and application. And in addition to that, we also have models for trees. By establishing a library 3D model for different types of trees, as you can see, we can simulate and observe how a landscape changes if you plant different kinds of trees on the same spot. Okay, and we have established 3D models of various road facilities as well, and including traffic lights, street lights, and also road signs. For the case of road facilities, we've gone through an object modeling where we were able to place a unique ID on each object. And this will enable an easy installation later for IoT, for example, devices and efficiently, and also for the maintenance in the future. Okay. So finally, moving on to Cyber Jeonju project. In this component, Alex formed a separate project task force for the development of spatial analysis service model for solving various problems that exist in Jeonju City, and also formed a consultative body which consists of civic groups as well as regional experts and public officials. Just to emphasize that through Cyber Jeonju project, we included third party in participating in this project to define the most urgent city problems that are the current problem for us. And with this consultative body, we discussed various potential smart city service model for the development, and we tried to secure all relevant basic data. Okay. And as a result, we've explored 12 smart city service models in 8 different areas, including environment, welfare, safety, and etc. So for example, in the field of environment, if you look on the screen, this service model was applied in the digital twin model to simulate and select suitable location for heat wave shelters on the based on the distribution analysis of vulnerable social groups. Okay. And this example is a service model in the field of safety, where we can utilize this model in digital twin to manage old buildings efficiently by visualizing them in 3D, and also according to their grade. So this slide shows some of the outcome examples of urban spatial data analysis service model, which we linked with digital twin. They are simulations for indoor AED access, planting trees, and solar power generator installation. And last one is the fire truck entry path prediction. So Alex will continue to develop various spatial data analysis models to solve urban problems and provide services by linking it to our digital twin model. Okay. So for the future, digital twin applications will be more than just a simulation, but it will be more to do with IoT. Citizens will be able to experience IoT technology more closely through digital twin. Let me introduce you to 2 of the services that we are currently working on at the moment. First service demonstrates the river management service, which we're working on currently. What we did here is that we've installed IoT sensors at the very ends of the river that measures the water level as well as the pollution level of the river. Using these data collected from the sensors, we can simulate and monitor the changes of water level as well as obviously the pollution level of the river. And by linking it with to our digital twin, we can provide services such as like a river alert service that can go off if the water level goes too high. Then we can alert the people around and and prevent them from entering or utilizing any of those facilities that are around the river, including the riverside road. And the second service I want to share is the COVID-19 service that we are busy developing as COVID-19 preventive measures. What we did here is that at the moment we've placed facial recognition devices in our every entry in our Alex headquarters. This device also has a functionality to to recognize our body temperature. And with this IoT device installed and linked with our digital twin model, we will be able to visualize, monitor, and control the entry of individuals, as well as monitor their travel path. So in addition to do that, we also installed IoT air sensors as well as air purifiers in each section of the building floor as well. So when the sensor detects a certain level of air pollution, and then it is alerted through our digital twin model, which will allow the controller to then switch on the air purifier. You will be able to visualize and monitor the change of air pollution level from our digital twin model in real time. So, but unfortunately, there is obviously no sensor that can detect the coronavirus at this very point. So considering the serious situation that we have around the world with the COVID-19, we thought it's just best to put on these air purifiers on our day. Okay. But still, these services will definitely be of help towards reducing the spread of COVID-19, which we believe. And we are continuously working on and developing more ideas around this in this area. So finally, for our future plan, we are aiming to completely establish our digital twin model for the entire area of Jeonju, as Dr. Kim mentioned earlier, with our follow-up projects and so on. So hopefully by end of 2021, we'll be able to do that together with the foundation of online platform for our digital twin model, so that we can develop and provide various smart city services through digital twin model in all corners of Jeonju area. So that's what we plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, as well for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Taikjin. Is there any question for these two gentlemen? I can see a long question from Christian Lemoncrit. Okay, I'll need to read this. So I don't know if you can see it, Simon, on the Q&A as part of the Zoom. You can see it, but I'll read it. Thanks for this fantastic presentation. As you said, in smart cities, you will use all kinds of sensors. There will be many sensors at many places. Public sensors, maybe also be privately owned sensors. In the Netherlands, we consider the development of a sensor register. Is there a question here? The twin should be transparent twin. Transparency is a service. So I think the question is about more about transparency of twins. And also I will add another aspect to it. It's about privacy. So you track people where they are. So how do you deal with that issue? If you can unmute yourself, please.
So yeah, so what was the question? So we were very shortly disconnected just a while ago.
I think there's a long description here, but it's about having a transparent twin and the privacy, people's privacy. I think it's a key question. You mentioned that you track people, particularly in this situation of COVID, and then you can see where they are. And how do you deal with the privacy, individuals' privacy? Yeah.
So in terms of, as far as I'm aware of, we are comparatively very less sensitive towards privacy. It's like I think the current country characteristics that we value our safety more than the some individuals' privacy. Obviously, we value our individual privacy very high, but we thought, but putting privacy in front of the safety would bring worse situation in the long term. So I think that's sort of what everybody, all the people in Korea agreed to sort of listen to the government in terms of COVID-19 response situation. And I think it's just a cultural or country characteristics that sort of helps us doing that. And also this kind of sensor issue in terms of privacy and all that, we haven't obviously applied this throughout the entire city of Jeonju. It's just a pilot project, and this service, a spatial analysis service, hasn't been published or is officially being used. It's just now being tested in our Alex headquarters building. So obviously for this to go in a larger scale, we will have to get approval, and obviously to see how the citizens, the actual citizens that live in Jeonju respond to sharing their privacy and all the sensor data. And there isn't enough sensors that are installed around the city anyways. And if for this to go in a larger scale, obviously a lot of the sensors that meets our goal in terms of to what kind of service that we want to provide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Just I'm conscious of time. There's one more question about your presentation. If you can quickly answer this. This is about the cost of establishing this system. So how have you done a cost benefit analysis? How expensive this exercise is, and does it return value?
Yes, that must be a very a huge interest to everybody. In terms of the cost, it varies, and I'm not even also quite sure myself. It all depends on to what extent, which functionality do you want to apply, and what kind of service that you want to get, and in what scale, and how big the area, because it's a matter of how much accurate that you want to go towards. You know, so for example, if you want to become like really accurate in terms of providing such service, getting the data from sensor and all that, obviously you're going to have to purchase a large amount of good quality sensors and install them around the city. So that in terms of that, we need to do a budget breakdown, considering so many aspects. For example, like the scale, the size of the area, and all that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess the short answer is that there is still a scope to work on the costing. There's no clear cost benefit analysis that you have done yet.
Yeah, everybody, I think,
Excellent.
even if I think we're not the only one who's trying this for the first time, but everybody are busy trying and trying to develop different kind of spatial analysis services linking with the digital twin. I think we are one of the first among the group. Together with other groups that are trying this in this new area of digital twin. Yeah, so we will develop more on it, and as people get more used to utilizing such technology, I think it will become more clear in terms of for the budget and so on. Yeah,
well, that's surely Korea is one of the leading countries in this space. Thank you again for your very nice presentation. So let's move on. I'm conscious of time. Next presentation in the list is by James Kavanagh from RICS. If James, if you share your screen, please, and unmute yourself to do the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll just put this onto full screen.
Yes,
make it a bit more palatable for everybody.
Yeah.
Now, there we go. Can you all see that okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Mohsen? Oh, good to go?
Yep. All good. Yes.
Great,
Yes,
thanks.
good to go. Yes.
And I'll whiz my way through this because, you know, we've been speaking a bit about the issues between interaction between the urban and land areas, or urban and rural, and then the technology end from our friends in Korea. And what I want to talk about is the other connectivity between the two areas, which is financial and economic, usually through the establishment of land value, and how the importance, the incredible importance that has within the areas of land acquisition and due diligence processes within arriving at agreed or sustainable levels of compensation. But also, I want to update you all on the work we've been doing within GLTN on the valuation of unregistered land, a difficult area, and also some other work that we've been doing on land acquisition processes such as ILMS. My name is James Kavanagh. I'm based in London. I'm a native of Dublin. It's great to see so many people from around the world on this call, and I know these issues of land value and how land valuation works. I'm a land surveyor by background, but you know, in the classical sense, so valuation was a small part of our education in Dublin in the 1980s. But I know not so now, where many younger surveyors have gone down the geospatial technology rabbit hole a bit too much from my maybe old-fashioned ways of looking at surveying as being quite a broad-based educational process. But anyway, onto this end of things. So land acquisition and compensation is a massive issue globally. I know UN Habitat knows this, and UN FAO certainly do, and it's good to see a few people online from that organization. This is a screenshot from a website that I'm very fond of called Land Matrix. Those of you who are lucky enough to go to the Landac conference in Utrecht in Holland every July, apart from this year, of course, I think it went virtual for a while, will know these people and the enormous amount of work that a lot of NGOs and other areas have been doing and trying to gather information on what can be the sometimes shady area of land acquisition and large land deals. So in the context, say, of this global graphic, just to give you an idea of the background, we're only looking at deals here for large-scale land investments of over 400 hectares. You know, this is a big area of land. When you think about the average farm in sub-Saharan Africa that's necessary to keep a family economically viable is only 10 hectares. It goes down into other levels within the country of 50 hectares. But you can see the amount of acquisition and the amount of transfer that's going on globally. And of course, this is you know, in many ways financially driven, in many ways asset driven. Land is a safe bet. We see that in the industrialized West as much as in the developing world, where, you know, even we can see even now over the COVID crisis, our commercial and retail and office-based commercial property portfolios really starting to hit the buffers and suffer a lot because of basically the depopulation of urban centres in many ways. Certainly here in London, we're looking at a fall of nearly 20% in rent and tenancy rates within central London areas, and that's replicated in cities across the industrialized world. So where are investment companies, large sovereign wealth funds, etc., looking to invest and put their money? Well, they're looking at land. Land is almost like a gold standard of investment. Doesn't rise too much in many ways, and I will speak about how it does rise in our urban rural linkage, but it doesn't fall in many ways. So a lot of countries and investment vehicles are looking to invest in land. And that's why it's absolutely critical that when we're looking at those investment policies or those acquisition policies or those sustainable compensation policies, that they are on the button when it comes to thinking of fair compensation and these other types of issues that we need to take into context. Okay, so we've been looking at a number of due diligence frameworks globally. The UN FAO voluntary guidelines is, I've said this many times, this is our North Star in land professionalism globally, whether it's urban or rural. It is the umbrella and framework that we work with under, and we still learn lessons from it on a daily basis. Well, certainly last week when we had a masterclass call on the valuation of unregistered land. Those elements on valuation and compulsory acquisition, or eminent domain as it's called in the Americas, within the voluntary guidelines are very, very powerful and apt, and give a good kind of a good policy framework for people to work within. That was then backed up by a due diligence output from UNFAO again, for lawyers working in large-scale agricultural investment, and then of course FIG's fantastic work on compulsory purchase and compensation, and I would say on sustainable taxation, land taxation. I know it's not the most exciting area when we look at some of the things that our South Korean colleagues have been speaking on, but it's absolutely fundamental to kind of economic survival. And it's a key part really of what we try and get right within the land professional area. And then into other due diligence areas such as ILMS, and I'll speak more about that in a moment, about creating a basic, robust concept for exchanging land and property in a clear and transparent manner. This is fundamentally connected to land-based financing. We heard the keynote speaker, Rafael Tuts, talk about those urban and rural linkages, and their, you know, and how they're at the sharp end where things happen. And that's absolutely right from a land valuation point of view. You know, agricultural land has a certain value, but when your ability to do something different with that land through, say, planning changes or the arrival of amenities or publicly paid for services or infrastructure arrives, and therefore its planning can then change from agricultural to residential or commercial quite quickly. The value of that land, because it's connected to what you can do, and this is sometimes a difficult concept to get, can change exponentially, so almost by 10 times, if not by 100 times. So that value uplift, that huge change from agricultural to, say, residential value, you know, who captures that? So land value capture, land value transfer, land value taxation is an absolutely critical part, I think, of that of the new urban agenda, and financing appropriate levels of urbanization. We have a general saying within the some of the more economic and financial areas of surveying, where, you know, you can't tax without service provision for people. It's got to be publicly acceptable. So those levels need to be set properly, and people need to understand what they're doing. And I will come back to the FIG sustainable taxation document in a moment after I speak a bit more about due diligence procedures. So within the context of due diligence, I mentioned the international financial reporting systems, the IFRS, Basel I, Basel II. Everything we do ends up as an asset somewhere on a balance sheet. We may not like that politically, but that's that kind of, you know, market-driven economic model that the world is, you know, sliding slowly down on. Some countries much further down than others, such as here in the UK, and we can see some of the problems with that. So it's not just all plain sailing, but we've tried to bring these different measurement standards in different areas of practice. So one on international property, one on construction. So the costing behind construction, you imagine trying to figure out the difference between the cost of an airport in Kenya and the difference with an airport in Bulgaria, like, you know, the different aspects taken into consideration. And then land measurement. So looking at the, like I put up there beside it, the worksheet, the basics that are needed to exchange a parcel. So parcel level areas of land. So a data rich area will easily fill these in. If anything, too many. In England, we have over 30, 40, 50 touch points of information for every parcel of land. It's incredibly complicated to bring it together on large projects, such as High Speed 2, for instance, that we're doing between London and Birmingham, thousands upon thousands of land parcels. And you will find that, you know, when it comes to compensation over land, that can add almost to 25, 30% of an overall project cost, is often forgotten when we think about construction costs, but is a major part of that development land value costing. But it all feeds into the valuation of assets that are prepared on a common worldwide basis as set by the international valuation standards, and then into the international reporting standards, encompassed, of course, within this this cloak of ethics that we all work within as professionals. But I think that's the key point. It all becomes an asset. It is all valued. It all appears somewhere. It is used for different things. It is used for collateral. It is used for loaning and lending purposes. It is used for taxation and social security purposes, and used for social justice purposes. And of course, it's all part of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is just an example of the coalition that we built on ILMS, much the same indeed for the valuation of unregistered land. So organizations from around the world, but many organizations that we're used to dealing with within our geospatial and land surveying and land professional networks, such as the ESRIs and the UNFAOs, the UNGGIMs, etc. But then also organizations that we're not used to dealing with, like the International Valuation Standards, different aid agencies, and different universities from around the world. But a very, very global collaborative basis. And I know that I could see Vladimir on there, and he'll remember when UNFAO were bringing together the voluntary guidelines and the long meetings that were held around the world to reach consensus. And I think there was some very, very valuable lessons learned from that process that we brought into the development of these processes. So, the next stage with an ILMS is we built a website, and we have translated the first stage document into, let's count them all up, 8 different languages. So Arabic, French, Turkish, German, Russian, even Irish, my own language. That was the Irish Association did that one. So and that was very, very important part of the process, where the coalition members themselves were able to handle and run their own translation, which also helped with the collaborative nature of the work and getting it out there so people could read, understand, and of course debate in their own national language. Very, very important. And the important aspect to that is the consensus it brings, but also the ability to then embed this within processes where sometimes it may work, sometimes it may not. We were on a call recently with Uganda. They want to put it within their land-based systems. The same here in the UK, and many other countries around the world have already adopted, like Russia. And it is just basically a standardized process. We've also been speaking to our friends in the land administration domain modeling. I saw Christian ask a question there earlier about the outputs from functioning land administration systems need to provide the information that the markets need to operate in the first place. So onto the valuation of unregistered land, a sister project to ILMS, and a continuation of work that we've been doing within the valuation area, and particularly in the valuation of unregistered land and property area for a number of years. This is not an easy area. Nobody wants to talk about it, even though it encapsulates about 70 to 80% of land and property within the world. It leaves a gigantic hole in tax revenue across the world. Those of you who are having difficulty sleeping, the property taxation in Africa by Bill McCluskey and Riel Franson is, well, it is a fantastic book, but it is worth look just to see those, those fall offs, where in OECD country, its average GDP take from property, land and property taxation is around 2 to 3%, up to 4 to 5% here in the UK, where in Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa particularly, data poor societies, that's at 0.01% of GDP. So an enormous hole in public finances caused by a lack of information and a lack of value being attributed to property, which is the key element. We worked on GLTN on the valuation of unregistered land policy document a number of years ago. We also did some heavy duty research in Peru, Ghana, and Indonesia, looking at how unregistered land markets actually work, and they do. Markets don't need a political ideology behind them to work. They work anyway. We have been buying and selling property since we lived in caves as humans before any political systems came into being. It's an aspect of human nature that is something we needed to get used to. And then UNFAO's work on value and land tenure rights and the international valuation standards. And this was an important thing to think about as we worked the way into development of this manual. We had the masterclass last week. Was how these things work in different societies. Our concept of value, market value, is fundamentally based on a principle of a willing buyer and a willing seller. There are several different methodologies behind valuation, as many of you will know. Basically the comparison method, the income method, and the replacement, and a myriad different subsets within that. Comparable information is king, certainly when it comes to market, to compare like with like. But like I said, the concept of market value, willing buyer, willing seller, what happens when one of those is not willing? Usually the seller. So other aspects need to be taken into consideration, particularly when we're thinking of communal or tribal land and the issues of social cultural value, or as we're now edging our way into environmental value and how that then works. We brought together a small expert working group. It's part of the GLTM Partners Initiative, which has an urban rural linkage, which you heard about yesterday if you're online, by Eugene. And our current status is we had a masterclass last week, and I'll have a meeting of the expert group tomorrow, and we'll be looking at some of the which I'll speak about in a moment, some of the areas of contention that came up. The content, it's structured like a guidance note, so it'll be typical to what you would see if you were using IVS, international standards, or RICS, Red Book valuation standards. There's a strong emphasis on competence, the basis of value, the key to understanding valuation and its use within unregistered land aspects, what to look out for when valuing unregistered land, and a general checklist of what professional valuers, if there are any. Of course, we have a massive capacity issue in many of these areas across the world, and how these things will work in reality. So, that was a key thing that's starting to come out of this. Land rights, of course, have a market value of their economic capital and a non-market value. It was these non-market values, of natural capital and socio-cultural capital that, are starting to edge their way into what is really our Western kind of classical economic model of how value works. And I think that's a key thing to understand when we start to think about, as Rafael mentioned, those urban-rural linkages, that change in value at that sharp end of where development occurs, where agricultural becomes rural, and of course can go back the other way, are absolutely quite key things to understand, and how they work, because they can cause a lot of speculation and a lot of distress. So last week we had a wide-ranging discussion. There was a lot of talk and discussion on competence and professional capacity. We just don't have enough professionals globally. I think there's about 40 professional valuers in Indonesia, a gigantic country, the biggest Muslim country in the world, and that's replicated across the planet. So if there's any academics online, I would start to encourage you to include these economic geography aspects of our classical education back into academic programs. Of course, not to the detriment of other elements, but it's really, really needed. We just don't have enough people to be able to do this properly, and it's a key aspect of maintaining, well, social justice amongst many different aspects of the SDGs. Also, we were looking at examples of unregistered land and evaluation. Some countries around the world have done it, some for taxation basis, usually sustainable taxation, the banding system, like has happened in some small areas within Africa, but also in the West, including in Ireland, my own country, just to get some kind of revenue flowing to local authorities, to provision of services to people. A bit on the format, headings and text. But like I said, the key arguments, again, is around those concepts of market value. Yeah, very much different from use and taxation value. I think everybody needs a bit of a MOOC and a general introduction to the concepts of valuation. There's a lot of confusion about what we mean by these different terms, and then the evolving concepts of natural and socio-cultural value. Within the UK, for instance, we're dealing with some enormous legislation, on environmental land management, which is in their environment and agricultural bills, which are taking up the slack for agricultural and land compensation post-Brexit, just what we need, after COVID, Brexit as well. And that's going to be, that's based fundamentally on understanding natural value. what people bring to that sphere of change and how it works. And this is, you know, an aspect that we need to make sure that professionals involved in the valuation of unregistered land understand. They may not be expert because it is very much an evolving area, but it's something we need to raise and take into consideration. The next stages will be going out to a global consultation, and we hope to, we will send final draft to GLTN for December with publication early in 2021. And I think this document really has a big role to play, you know, as a manual within helping that financial linkage between urban and rural land, and maintaining those an equitable level of not only sustainable taxation, but also land acquisition compensation. Okay, Mohsen, that's me. And of course, anybody's got any questions, I'll be online for the whole rest of the session.
Yes, I think if you don't mind, we skip the questions now.
Sure, yeah. Go to the end.
Yeah, because I'm conscious of time and we've got 2 more presentations and only half an hour to go. So let's move on. Thank you, James, again for interesting presentation. In fact, I had my question myself, but I'll hold on to that. So if you can stop sharing the screen, please. Excellent. Our next presenter is Vladimir Evtimov from FAO. And I've got his presentation here, so I'm gonna share it from my side. And Vladimir, then you can tell me when you want to move to the next slides. Over to you.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. I am Vladimir Evtimov, Land Tenure Officer from the headquarters of FAO in Rome, and I will be talking today about enabling resilience via land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures. Next one, please. My presentation will talk a little bit about the frameworks of resilience and land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures, the roles of land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures for resilience. I will share with you some summary of the uses of land administration and geospatial information for disasters. And I will then discuss some considerations about investing in land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures to enable resilience. And then I have some concluding remarks. This presentation is actually based on work that was done in partnership between FAO and the World Bank under the cooperative program, and mostly with my friends and colleagues, Keith Bell and Alvaro Federico Barra. And next one, please. Talking about the frameworks, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development reaffirms the need to reduce the risk of disasters, and very much harmonized with it and related to it is the Sendai framework, which says that all development should be risk-informed to be sustainable, and to reduce losses in lives, livelihoods, and health, and in the economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets of persons, businesses, and communities and countries. The Sustainable Development Goals include themselves targets which are on reducing the exposure and vulnerability to disasters and building of resilient infrastructure And on the other hand, there are land tenure security indicators and targets in the Sustainable Development Goals. Next one, please. The VGGT, which was already mentioned by James, is a framework which covers a lot of aspects related with tenure. And according to the VGGT, tenure insecurity, non-recognition of legitimate land rights and interests, or the lack of records on access rights, reduce the resilience of people to natural disasters, food insecurity, and global challenges like climate change effects, migration, and conflicts. The VGGT consider in depth the land administration systems and tenure aspects of emergency responses and resilience building. And also the VGGT promote integrated frameworks for existing land recording systems and other spatial information systems, including spatial data infrastructures. Next one, please. I would now speak a little bit about the roles of land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures for resilience. They have a potential to facilitate information synergy across many thematic domains in order to support efficient and effective decision-making and leverage land as a fundamental economic factor and original source of all material wealth around us. The land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures are strategically important for the economic prosperity of people, the inclusive growth, sustainable development, responsible governance of natural resources, and also resilience. Next one, please. These systems and infrastructure are critical for systematic and institutional preparedness to enable mitigation of hazards, adaptation, and recovery from shocks or stresses. Inadequacy of authoritative land tenure and geospatial information is a crucial impediment to disaster response and recovery. So the significance of land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures in disaster context is being reconfirmed during the current COVID-19 pandemic, and this was mentioned by the other presenters. Next one, please. At this slide, I share with you some of the summaries that were identified when we analyzed the use of land administration information and spatial data information in disaster contexts and in pandemic contexts. Authoritative geospatial information plays critical roles in all phases of disaster management: disaster prediction, disaster prevention, preparedness and mitigation, emergency response, evacuation planning, search and rescue, shelter operations, and the post-disaster restoration and monitoring. Reliable and comprehensive land administration information, including land records, are critical for many of the phases of disaster management, including preparedness, recovery, and reconstruction. Especially important for the pandemic context is address information, for example, to enable reliable contact tracing and even social distancing. land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures underpin economic and social recovery, support the minimization of shocks of disasters and pandemics, and enable quicker recovery to return to normal. Assessing the likely impact of disaster events requires detailed inventory of real estate assets, buildings, housing, crops, and infrastructure, including specific location-based information, such as street addresses and other horizontal and vertical positioning referencing data. Although pandemics don't damage or destroy such assets, a spatial inventory of housing and occupancy would be expected to be beneficial in pandemic situations. Secure tenure is the key to reducing disaster vulnerability and risks. The more secure, formal, and reconcilable the rights and systems are, the less vulnerable land users are to eviction or loss of livelihoods in the case of a disaster, and the more likely they are to receive compensation for losses sustained. Secure tenure increases investments in dwellings, which reduces risks and improves resilience through better siting and construction of buildings. Better quality housing in terms of space, ventilation, access, amongst other factors, is conducive to supporting good social distancing and enhancing pandemic resilience. Land administration and geospatial information needs to be accurate to reflect reality on the ground and to be up to date if it is to contribute to disaster preparedness and risk mitigation and to responses to disaster events. In many countries, this is not the case, making them vulnerable to disasters. Street addressing transcends both land administration and geospatial information and is vital for both disaster and pandemic resilience. Next one, please. I am going to talk a little bit now about investing in land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures in order to enable resilience. Investment in disaster resilient infrastructure and early warning systems in the first place saves lives. And therefore, it is a priority beyond economic benefit considerations. That is quite interesting from the point of view of entry points in order to assist governments to invest in our field. Nevertheless, experience shows that investments in disaster resilient infrastructure yield benefits which are 4 to 36 times higher than initial outlays. Spatial data infrastructure is in its essence infrastructure, and therefore soft infrastructure should be funded just like hard infrastructure, targeting digital information, secure data storage of land administration information and spatial data infrastructure, providing geospatial information that is accessible, authoritative, and sustainable. Next one, please. Resilience requires a high degree of geospatial preparedness, which is best achieved through regional, national, or city spatial data infrastructures. Inequity in geospatial preparedness places some low-income countries at a severe disadvantage in developing resilience. Building resilience through sustainable land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures requires investment, both for the development and implementation, as well as ongoing maintenance, further development, and continuous improvement. Next one, please. The United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in 2020 promoted the idea that in the medium and long term, increased investment in national data and statistical systems and the mobilization of additional international and domestic resources will be imperative if we are to build back better after the pandemic. New data sources and technologies for data collection and for the integration of various data sources will need to be explored. The integration of geospatial information and statistical data will be particularly important. And in this regard, FAO has launched its hand-in-hand geospatial platform, which goes this way. Next one, please. Following a disaster event like the pandemic, construction, land administration, and geospatial information should be enhanced through building back better, so that there is a greater resilience to future disaster events. Only by building back better can communities be protected in the future. Next one, please. Rebuilding after disaster events requires reliable, accurate geospatial data at the appropriate levels of precision to enable engineering and construction works to be undertaken. And this is something that volunteer geographic information cannot achieve. Following the pandemic, reliable, accurate geospatial information is also required, especially in order to support rehabilitation of slums and areas of homelessness in order to ensure they are appropriately planned and serviced to ensure health and well-being. Next one, please. In the conclusion, I would say that all countries, intergovernmental coordination bodies, development agencies, civil society organizations, and professional bodies, such as the Federation of Surveyors, have a role to play in enabling resilience through land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures. Fit-for-purpose approaches to land administration can reduce costs and promote greater transparency and accountability in building of complete land administration systems, given the growing availability and reach of technologies. However, one should always bear in mind that technology is never a solution, but it is an enabler rather than solution. Next one, please. In the post-pandemic recovery, technology is likely to prove even more critical for the collection and management of land-related data to advance land rights and tenure security for millions of people who are left out of formal land systems. But mere formalization of rights is in overpopulated and unhealthy slums will not build resilience unless it is combined with spatial planning measures. Next one, please. The post-pandemic world presents opportunities for significant progress with carbon emission reduction, climate change, green growth, and pro-blue. Land administration systems and spatial data infrastructures have key roles to play in the resilience of the post-pandemic world by building back better. Next one, please. And thank you for your attention. I'm open for your questions and discussion. Over.
Thank you, Vladimir, for your presentation. If you don't mind, we hold on to questions. We go to the next presentation, and then we will have some time so we can ask the participant to ask their questions from the last three presenters. So our next presentation is by Professor Chryssy Potsiou. You all know her, our former president of FIG. So she will be presenting as well. So Chryssy, if you can please go to the full screen. More, thank you.
Is it
Over
okay
to
now?
Yes, we can see it all.
Yeah, can you see?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, FIG Commission 7, for giving me the opportunity to present you what we are working at the moment within the UNECE Committee on Housing and Land Management and the Working Party for Land Administration. In June this year, right after the lockdown, we have launched together with FIG the new publication, Guidelines for Formalization of Informal Constructions. And this is a result of a long research, joint research between FIG and UNECE. So I'm going to give you some information about this publication and to show you the connection with SDGs and how we are working now to make a complementary action plan for dealing with COVID in informal settlements. The scope of this publication was to provide information to governments that they have to face this problem of informal construction and how to structure a fit-for-purpose formalization program in an affordable, reliable, inclusive and timely manner to improve residents' health, living and working conditions. And of course, to meet the SDGs timely. So mainly we give information how to formalize, how to make the process. But also we give information about the preparatory work that needs to be done and the post-formalization factors that need to be seriously considered. Also, we emphasize that the formalization projects should have economic, environmental, and social benefits for everyone, not only for the residents of informal settlements. And we mainly focus on issues of improved security of tenure, providing right to adequate housing and access to credit. So mainly we prioritize the SDG target 1. Goal 1 and target 1.4, but we are related very closely to several other SDGs and for voluntary guidelines for response for governance of tenure and the new urban agenda and several other global documents.
Chryssy?
Yes?
We can't hear you sometimes quite clearly, so if you can speak closer to your microphone or computer, that would be good. Thank you.
Is it now better?
This is better now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So why we need to make the guidelines? Because governments have initiated projects, formalization projects, but as formalizing informal construction is a very complicated issue, it is difficult to prioritize, and governments try to address all fronts at once, simultaneously. And they end up to delays and bottlenecks, and the momentum is missed. Or sometimes really governments, they do not understand the size of the impact, the economic impact, the social impact, and the environmental impact of delaying formalization. And I have to clarify here for those that they are not very familiar with informal development in UNECE region that we are talking of course, informal constructions, but of a fairly good quality. Of course, they are substandard. Of course, they are out of the economic cycle. Of course, they are without any permits or in exceed of permits, but they cannot be characterized as slums. So it is actually a dead capital. So many countries have initiated formalization projects. So the overall concept is that informal construction can be considered as a commodity. And this can provide, if it is formalized, can provide access to funds that through that can fund all kinds of construction improvements and general improvements that they are necessary for disaster recovery, for education, health, and business. So priority is to provide titling and property registration in a fast, independent, and low-cost manner. And no one should be taking advantage of formalization so that it will not be delayed. And post-formalization or parallel improvements are really important. As we see now, especially with the pandemic, parallel improvements and additional parallel improvements are really serious and important. So there is no one size fit for all for the general improvement provision. And we have made a list in the publication of several tools that may be used according to the situation. The voluntary participation, it is very important. So this should be based on trust and willingness of the residents to be formalized. And of course, we emphasize that there is a need for comprehensive land policies and reforms that should include pro-growth planning and permits for the future, property valuation, creating job opportunities, fair taxation, and all these issues. And we make link to several important documents of FIG and UNECE in this field, because we realize that we realize that tenure security and housing are social and human rights issues, an important issue, but also security of ownership is fundamental for the social issue for the well-being. But this is still not enough. We need to improve the value, the general value, the quality of the construction so that we can have the anticipated result. And to provide access to capital to people. So everything is interrelated, and people should not continue to be trapped in risky investments. So the structure of the guidelines that we inform people, we give them a support, how to prepare the strategy for formalization. This is the most important thing, so that they will build the political will and a global support within the community and within those that they are legal and those that they are not illegal. And then how to prepare the framework for formalization, how to formalize actually the constructions, and what are the next steps. And the most important, the biggest challenge to our opinion is that how to persuade people to go beyond the established scientific engineering and planning practice, how to legalize the illegal, and how to overcome all these challenges. It is actually the biggest challenge is the mindset change. We give also information on how to use the guidelines, so that to read the guidelines, to see our approach, and to identify the local problems, and to identify the local experts, and then to discuss how they will apply the guidelines in a flexible manner, how to allow formalized construction to be modified and improved, and how to provide incentives to the owners for health and safety improvements. As I said, we are very close to SDG 1, target 1.4, but also SDG 11, SDG 3 for good health and well-being, and especially for strengthening the capacity and early warning and for risk reduction in countries, especially for developing countries, to SDG 5 for gender equality, SDG 6 for clean water and sanitation and provision of services, 7 also to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for the improvements, energy improvements that are necessary for the constructions, SDG 9 for industry, innovation and infrastructure for provision of sustainable, resilient infrastructure in these settlements. And 10 for reduced inequalities to empower and promote the social, economic and political inclusion. SDG 13 for climate action, and SDG 16 for peace, justice and strong institutions. But of course, at the same time that the publication was launched, we had the serious impact from the pandemic. And through other webinars and global brainstorming, we are at the moment to say that are we still on track to deliver the land targets? And not many countries have already reported after 5 years of implementation much progress. So many of the formalization projects that countries have initiated already face significant additional delays due to the situation of the COVID. So we have to see how the whole effort is affected. And we see that the COVID-19 has plunged the global economy into its deepest recession since the World War II. And dense urban centers, but also rural settlements are in the center of the coronavirus storm. The situation is even worse. You can see that it is obvious that it is even worse in the unplanned and dense informal settlements and slums, of course, that often exist in the outskirts of the urban centers. And there is, we hear very frequently that unlike other natural disasters that are more or less localized and governments know where to provide, where to act immediately and where to provide support, COVID-19 is or may exist everywhere. And it affects the aged people, those with chronic diseases, those that they cannot help themselves, they cannot protect themselves. And this is important, that this complicates recovery actions more. It is true, but also it is true that COVID-19 has a higher localized concentration among informal settlement residents, where people are not prepared and basic infrastructure is poor and the living habits are different, and they cannot afford to implement the measures that countries really require. And so there also is a significant lack of reliable georeference data, as we heard in the previous presentation, and I'm thankful for that, because it set the scene for my presentation, how important it is to have reliable georeference data to deal with COVID. So it is really anticipated that almost half of the global group of workers in the formal and informal economy are now at risk of losing their livelihoods. And there is a very big danger for creating new poor. And we do not know for how long this pandemic will last, so the impact may be far worse. So we have, we are now in the situation and within UNEC region to see how we can, as experts, use our experience within the EU and within other regions to provide support and to provide the technically driven policy tools to governments, so to identify and empower those most vulnerable, those exposed most to the pandemic. And also to emphasize that measures taken by governments to empower people against the pandemic are also related to the good management of land. Therefore, we need to focus on a fit-for-purpose formalization of those dilapidated areas, and measures should be more localized and evidence-based and fit-for-purpose. It is important to identify who, and more importantly, where are the most vulnerable, the most exposed. So the way countries prepare for a damaging event makes a difference to a resilient future. And we see that, unfortunately, coronavirus was a test. And sadly, even the world's supposedly most advanced nations have too visibly failed. So there is a lack, a lack of a global action plan on how to deal with deadly pandemics. And it is a dangerous lack of coordination among governments. So we try to emphasize this gap here, and we try to emphasize the importance of geospatial and demographic data, the combination of geospatial with demographic data. So if this is missing in authoritative data, especially in informal settlements, we should focus on low cost but still reliable tools and methods that may be used for acquiring the needed georeferenced information, including information derived from social media and crowdsourcing, and several applications for contact tracing to provide more localized and rather general measures. But it is really difficult. Believe me, now that we go in depth with the situation of informal settlements, even in the European region that, as I said, are not characterized as slums, the situation is very, very different. People cannot apply, cannot afford to stay at home, cannot work from home, cannot keep social distance. They do not have the basic hygienic conditions in their homes. Sometimes they don't even have the luxury of having fresh water and soap to clean themselves frequently. So also strict measures, as we have seen in general, that radically change everyday activities cannot easily be enforced, even in the formal sector. So you can imagine how difficult it is to track the situation in informal settlements. Even social safety net programs targeted to poor, it is difficult. It is difficult to identify who is in need and where is these people and how to deliver support. So residents in informal settlements must not be left behind. And this is a serious situation. Allowing substandard conditions in some areas is not only a threat to those residents, but also to the general population, as these people work both in the cities and in the rural areas. They continuously move, they continuously participate in the supply chain. So if they are infected, they may transfer the virus everywhere. So it is really an urgent issue to focus on these areas. And also gender inequality is really important, because women there really are in risk. They really provide their labor and support into the cities, but also in a risky situation. Then they come, for example, they are nurses, or they are they visit they take all kinds of jobs in order to earn their living. They are cleaners, for example. They are very close to the seas. And then they have to come back home and deal with their families and everything. So it is really important, and that now than ever before, for all social, all people and all actors to see what the next normal will look like, and make the bold and strategic decision to create a better future for all. And this is what we are working at the moment. We have a 3-pillar project now within the UNECE to develop, as I said, a supplementary document for a recovery action plan for informal settlements that will include detailed recommendation for pilot cities on how to increase capacity in formalization of informal constructions, which is very important and now is delayed due to the COVID, and intersectorial cooperation and innovative financing, and also how and what are the appropriate measures that should be applicable to deal with COVID-19 within informal settlements, and also what are the medium-term measures, how to proceed with fast construction and neighborhood improvements and service provision. Because as you understand, we cannot follow the standards. If we could follow the standards, then we wouldn't have informal construction. So we have to develop also fit-for-purpose approaches for improvements of constructions and neighborhoods. And this should be also planned to be fast and affordable. So this is what I had to report in this very important annual meeting of FIG Commission 7, and to wish all of you good success and good health and very, very fast recovery of this, pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chryssy. Thank you, Chryssy, for your presentation. So we have 7 minutes to finish the session. So if you've got any questions, please, you can ask, or you can raise your hand so I can give the mic to you, so you can ask the question that way, or you can write the question in the Q&A part of the Zoom. Okay, while you probably are typing, I've got a question for James. James, are you there?
How you doing, Mohsen? Go ahead.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I was interested in the concept of natural and social value of land as opposed to the economic value. And to give you an example, here in Australia, we've got indigenous land where we see that social cultural value of land, but when the boundary of that land stops, then you can't apply the Western sort of economic value of land to that land. Even if the culture wants it, the banks and creditors don't sort of realize that land against credit. So what's your view on that? So how we can blend these two sort of fundamentally perhaps different concepts in terms of land value?
Unmute so people can see what I was saying there. And yeah. It's good that you mentioned Australia on this, Mohsen, because those recent court cases on certain kind of First Nation Aboriginal rights, post-mining compensation based on spiritual value in Western Australia, where we even had the chair of Glencore resigning because of the way that they'd forced those issues through. It's become a bit of it caused cerebra globally amongst how to come up with these types of compensation, because I think that's the key difference. The difference between, as you mentioned, market value, which is a willing buyer, willing seller. So what would this gain on the open market? So it's all dependent on what I would pay for or you would. Yeah. And then the other aspects of value, so non-market value issues such as social, cultural, spiritual, and natural. And when we think about acquisition and that non-willing seller aspect of it, that's when these issues of compensation become quite live. So normally it comes out in a negotiation, but there's also people trying to put figures on this. Fantastic NGOs such as Namate in Africa have been dealing with local people on helping them understand the true intrinsic value of their land and property. Most people in informal situations grossly undervalue their land and property, so tend to get kind of done over a bit when it comes to the negotiation end of things. So it's important that people are aware, governments are aware, and this is where the issues of natural value starts to come in. It's an evolving area, but it's much like, you know, polluter pays or downstream issues. Say here in the UK, there was a study done on Dartmoor, you know, which holds water. It's a water catchment area for the city of Exeter. What happens if we build on Dartmoor? Exeter floods. You know, like the re-establishment of mangrove around the world. You know, that's natural capital. That brings a value to Bangladesh and Rangoon and Belize, for instance. So, or even Miami. So there's a kind of a follow-on kind of aspect of it, but it's becoming a very, very live topic as we move into areas of the world, you know, where our economic models that are not as kind of formalized and straightforward in many ways as the market value concepts of what we deal with in the industrialized West. And even here, it's very complicated as well, you know, from a social, cultural point of view and the emotive issues around acquisition. So it's all evolving. And but the natural capital and natural value areas, I think, is really one to keep an eye on over the next few years as it establishes itself.
Sure. I think, as you mentioned, it's very interesting area for our colleagues in universities and academia to look into the details. Thank you, James. It's really good. So we've got a question from Rowan to Raf and Vladimir, and that's about urban-rural linkages. So are we expecting that we will see more integrated approach on the land sector? So I guess in future we won't hear any urban-rural division. It is a integrated land issue. And also, are you aware of the UN GGIM framework for effective land administration? And do you see utility in that policy framework? Vladimir and Raf, if you can take on the question, please. Vladimir, do you want to answer?
Yes. First, to the question about UN Habitat GLTN and FAO working together, I have to say that FAO is recently working together with many more international organizations than it used to do in the past. And this is not only because urban and rural have to be integrated. This is because we understand very well the value of partnership. And my unit in FAO is in the partnerships and UN cooperation division. So this is indicative of the role that my organization sees in partnerships. And about the urban-rural dichotomy or division, let me just say that within the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure, the word urban is mentioned only once, and the whole document does not see land as separate between urban and rural. It already looks at it as an integrated land for everyone, and the linkages between urban and rural are an integral part of the land itself. The second part of the question is about the UN GGIM framework for effective land administration. Yes, we are aware of it, and our organization officially reacted to the development of the FELA framework. Frankly speaking, and here I'm expressing my personal opinion, I don't see the role of UN GGIM in land administration. There are so many frameworks already, and this one is, for me, a little bit redundant. Over.
Okay, thank you, Vladimir. Look, we've got, the time is over, but I don't see any question, but Raf, do you want to answer? You are on mute, please. If you can unmute yourself.
Just to complement Vladimir, one element is this transition from urban to rural, and I think it's important to emphasize that decisions, most of the impactful decisions are being made in this transition area, where currently it's not very well defined but land is being subdivided, and it sets a pattern for centuries to come. At the same time, there is not so much guidance for this transition area, the peri-urban parts of this world. And if we don't provide, or if we don't look for better frameworks, then we're going to set in very unsustainable patterns of urbanization that will be very costly, that will not be fair, and where the benefits, the land value capture benefits, will be captured by a very, very small group of people to the detriment of the broader society. So I think, yes, it's very important to focus on this transition right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Raf. Look, I don't see any question here, but I will ask one last question from Chryssy. And that question, Chryssy, is about the SDGs. You mentioned that are we on target in terms of the land related SDGs, but in general, I think we can ask that questions about all of the SDGs. Are we meeting them? Are we on target? Are we measuring them? But I guess I would ask a fundamental question and step back. Have we set the targets appropriately? Have we set the indicators appropriately? Maybe that's the reason that we are not achieving them. I just wanted to perhaps have your view on that one, and then we can conclude the session.
Yes, many times I think about that, and many times I see that what is the biggest development challenge from all what we have listed. And yeah, can we prioritize, or can we, there is a need to address all fronts simultaneously. So I think that the most important is, as I said, mindset change. And this we have not listed there. And this is what I'm working on in this project of formalization. And I wanted to add to what Rafael said before, especially in peri-urban areas, we have informal development, and we have all these big challenges that we need now to address, and we need to formalize, and we need to develop new approach, so that we will deal very fast. And now is the disaster with the disease, and we have to act even more smart and even more fast. So it is a challenge, yes. Yeah, okay. Everybody says that there is a big risk that we will go backwards, and the progress that we have already achieved globally is now in a very big danger that we will have delays. But we must be positive, we must be optimistic, we must keep on working.
Thank you, Chryssy. Look, I want to thank again the panelists for their presentation, really insightful and interesting presentations. Now, to wrap up, I would like to ask Cillian, our rapporteur, if he has anything to add, or before I close the session. Cillian, are you there?
Yes, I am there. I appreciated the way the presentation was going on, and I really like it. The presentations, and I don't have any other thing to add on. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, everyone, for attending. Chryssy, did you have anything to?
Yes, I also want to express my thanks to the technical people that they have developed all these digital tools that are very useful, and we saw the value very rapidly after the emergence of the disease. So really well done. Thank you for all this, and for the digital twin, and for everything. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, the participant. And I'm sorry if I haven't been able to give an opportunity to everyone, but we have a limited time. I'm sure some of you will continue with the other sessions. Thank you.